The 1440p 165Hz IPS monitor market is jam-packed full of impressive and worthwhile options. Chief among them, I think, has to be the Gigabyte M32Q. But is this, the BenQ EX2710Q, a better option? Is it more deserving of your hard-earned cash? Well, let's take a look and find out. The EX2710Q sports the standard specs for a sort of mid-range 1440p high refresh rate display, like a 165Hz refresh rate, an IPS panel, display HDR 400, FreeSync Premium, a quoted 95% coverage of the DCI-P3 spectrum, and a 1 millisecond response time. That all sounds pretty familiar, but there are a few what you might call lie by omissions there. Starting with the display HDR 400. I'm honestly not sure how they convinced VESA to let them put that sticker on, as worthless as the sticker is outright anyway, because the quoted typical brightness is just 250 nits, and in my testing I couldn't make it go higher than 238. Now, in a darker room, that is more than enough, but if you have a lot of ambient lighting and you're trying to, where you're trying to game, it's unlikely that, let's say, this is going to be the panel for you. That means that, at least personally anyway, I wouldn't even look twice at the HDR setting and stick to SDR instead. I should note though, this little sticker or this little button down at the bottom that's labelled HDRI doesn't really have anything to do with HDR. From their own help article, BenQ explained the HDRI settings are effectively just a gamma curve adjustment, and when I cycle through the modes here, yeah, that's pretty much exactly what it is. Also, that is both a setting that you can control manually in the menus, and it also oversaturates blue and a touch of green according to their guide as well, so yeah, great, I guess. The other somewhat misleading spec is the 1 millisecond response time. That is the MPRT, or Moving Picture Response Time, a calculated not measured figure that may as well be an NFT, as both have the same level of usefulness in reality. I suppose, somewhat to their credit, if you visit the specs page for the monitor, you will find that they've listed the grey to grey pixel response time as 2 milliseconds, but even that is misleading at best, and it's buried in the specs page, whereas the 1 millisecond MPRT time is quoted in the title and the name of the monitor as a key bullet point everywhere. It's on the box, it's on the product imaging, it's even in the main landing page multiple times. As for the 2 millisecond claim, well, that's technically not a lie, but to get a result that says that, you have to set it to the highest overdrive setting, choose a very small transition, and measure from about here to here, and claim that that represents the response time. It's kind of akin to saying that your car can do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds because you started the timer at 50 miles an hour. In reality, the response time, even on its maximum overdrive setting, is somewhere around 6 milliseconds, with some pretty poor overshoot, which only helps to extend the transition time. Happily, with overdrive turned down just a single step to 2 instead of 3, the results get much better, decreasing the overshoot considerably to the point where it's going to be fairly hard to notice, and it's actually a touch faster overall, with an average 5.76 of a perceived response time. The funny thing is that a response time sitting generally between 4 and 6 milliseconds is actually really good, especially for this class of panel. It's rare to find a display that doesn't spill well over its refresh rate window, something that is reflected in the UFO test, where it manages to fully render the frame for around a millisecond before the next frame starts being drawn. While that isn't absolutely perfect, as it still takes an entire frame worth of time to complete drawing the image, it's still noticeably better than a number of its even higher priced competitors. BenQ lead with that, not the purposefully misleading marketing. Now, those results should bode well for its gaming performance, and on the whole, it does. Even relatively fast motion still looks pretty clear and crisp, which means you get a pretty decent playing experience, playing a wide variety of genres of games. Sure, it's no esports pro display, but that isn't meant to be, and for the more sort of, let's say, casual gamer, the panel offers a fast enough response time for that to just not be a bottleneck. The only drawback when it comes to gaming is the input lag. Unlike response time, which is how long the panel itself takes to change colors, input lag is how long the panel takes, or how long the display takes to process the new frame that your graphics card sends it, and then start displaying that on screen. Using my time sleuth, which tests the monitor itself, it reported a relatively high or relatively slow 5.8 milliseconds of latency, which is a stark contrast to the 1 millisecond that Gigabyte's M27Q offers. Using NVIDIA's LDAT tool to measure the total system or click-to-photon latency, it reported a more respectable 23 millisecond average after a couple of runs. An earlier run averaged more like 33 milliseconds with quite a lot of variability, so it isn't absolutely perfect. That translates to the occasional, say, missed shot where the display is anywhere between 1 and like 5 frames behind the live game, and it's sort of potential for your, say, enemies in game to get a slight advantage over you when it's a battle just for reaction times. It's far, far, far from the worst that I've seen though, and for this style of monitor, it's perfectly adequate. One other nice thing about the display is its colors, especially in games that aren't just a flat palette of beige. You get a rather, well, pretty vibrant and rich view. The loud red of the Ferrari F1 car in Assetto Corsa stands out nicely against the deep green grass that's rolling over the Belgian hills, and should help you distract from the utterly appalling driving that I'm displaying in these clips. It turns out that driving with a keyboard is absolutely terrible, and that's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. Now, BenQ's claim that this has 95% coverage of the DCI-P3 spectrum is absolutely spot on. In fact, it's about 1% low, as my Spider X reported 96% DCI-P3 coverage, around 90% Adobe RGB, and well over 100% of the sRGB spectrum too. Compared to Gigabyte's M27Q, this is clearly aimed much more squarely at the DCI-P3 spectrum, whereas the M27Q is shifted more into the green tones and more closely matches the Adobe RGB space instead. Although, generally speaking, I think that the M27Q might have a slightly overall wider color space by comparison, although no big deal, and definitely has better brightness though. For content consumption, you know, chilling watching your favorite tech YouTuber, obviously, or, you know, something better, what you get is a pretty nice experience with the EX2710Q. It's not great on the brightness level, like I said, especially in brighter rooms, that could be a bit of a problem, but as long as your ambient lighting isn't too bright, you should have a pretty decent experience. It's a nice crisp and vibrant panel and a pleasant time. Much to my surprise, the front-facing speakers, the dual 2-watt speakers and the 5-watt woofer in the back, offer a remarkably good listening experience. Of course, they don't sound, you know, they don't hold a candle to a dedicated set of speakers or some nice headphones, but I've got to say that they were quite probably the best built-in monitor speakers I've heard, barring the Philips Momentum 55, because that's basically a TV with an included soundbar, so of course that one's going to sound better, and that's hardly a fair comparison, but these genuinely sounded pretty good. And while you do have a headphone jack out for feeding, say, a console's audio to dedicated speakers or headphones, these are certainly good enough to use if you don't have anything else. You know, use them casually if you like, especially if, like I said, you don't have anything else around. Now, I mentioned the consoles there. It's worth noting that this has two HDMI 2.0 ports, one DisplayPort 1.4 port, and a 2-port USB 3 hub, which means that it can connect to pretty much any PC you like without any issues. But if you want to run, say, an Xbox Series X at 1440p 120Hz, you might need to manually adjust your settings on the console, as it won't be running automatically at 120Hz because it doesn't use HDMI 2.1. And thus far the PS5 doesn't support 1440p at all, so I think it defaults to 1080p 120Hz, which won't look great as 1080p to 1440p isn't a direct pixel-to-pixel translation like 1080p to 4K is. So generally speaking, it's probably not the best option, but there are some ways of connecting if you want to. Finally, on the note of the physical, both appearance and functionality, I actually quite like the look of this thing, especially from the back. I think it's pretty stylish. It's a nice sort of subtle design while still standing out quite well, and does come complete with one of those annoying I/O cover plates that mean your I/O is sort of in a small block and recessed into the back and difficult to access, but it's there if you want it. The on-screen controls are fairly easy to get to down at the bottom right, and the on-screen menu itself is pretty easy, complete with the usual game modes and settings, including what BenQ call AMA, their version of overdrive, and blur reduction, aka backlight strobing or black frame insertion. The stand has a pretty large footprint on your desk while still being relatively sort of slim. You also do get good stability from it, which is nice, and you have the usual adjustments like tilt, height, swivel, and like 5 degrees of rotation. Like, I'm not sure why they included this, but I guess to level the actual monitor, the panel, if your desk isn't quite level. I don't know, but it's there if you want it. And the very final thing you should know about this is its price. It's listed on both BenQ's website and on places like Amazon, which of course there'll be an affiliate link in the description if you want to check it out, for £350, putting it around £20 more than the M27Q. And even if we take the lowest on sale prices, the M27Q is more like £50 cheaper instead, and that's kind of a problem. Options like Acer's VG271US is currently £280 and is pretty even in its performance, mostly across the board. Both of those and the countless other options in that market makes the EX2710Q pretty hard to justify. Having to spend more to get the same or worse performance doesn't sound like a great deal. At £280 or lower, I can see this being pretty competitive, but at £350, I'd much rather get an M27Q and save 20 quid, or failing that, something like the Acer for £70 less. Of course, that is all based on UK pricing and availability, but I know it can vary quite wildly across the world and also when you watch this, so feel free to take a look at the links in the description. I'll leave one to both this and the M27Q for you to take a look at. Those are Amazon affiliate links that will take you to your local Amazon store where you can see all that good stuff. But with that said, those are my thoughts, and I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below. What do you think of the EX2710Q? Is it a monitor you would pick up yourself? Are the sort of trade-offs worth it for you? Or would you rather get the M27Q instead, maybe the cheaper Acer or something else entirely? Like I said, feel free to let me know in those comments down below. If you want to see more of these videos, you can both be notified and kept up to date as they come out by hitting the subscribe button and turning on the bell notification icon, or you can check out the whole massive back catalogue of everything from monitor reviews like this to projects and reviews and everything in between I'll leave some options on the end cards when they pop up. Also, if you want to support the channel and keep me making these videos, then you can do so directly through the YouTube join button and becoming a YouTube member and getting some cool rewards, or becoming a patron instead if you'd rather, picking up a hoodie or t-shirt like this one, or a load of other designs that I made myself, or just using the affiliate links that are in the description as well. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.